What's going on, everybody? Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got some folks, everyone joining at the 10 o'clock hour here, Pacific time. I got to keep hitting admit all in the waiting room, so bear with me. I'm going to let that kind of populate for just a second. Really excited to have everybody here for our very first agency tactics webinar, educational seminar, whatever you want to call it. Really excited to have Kurt Turnison here with us. Kurt is an agency owner. He also, specializes in what we're going to be talking about today, and that is using online forms on your website and putting them, into practice in your agency. Just to kind of give you a little bit of house cleaning and kind of let you guys know what this is all about, so that there's no preconceived ideas. This is not a sales webinar. This is a tactics webinar. This is open to the public. This is not just for anybody who's in a particular subset of anything else. We wanted to put this on, and I'm going to be putting these on every single month. And so while Kurt will tell you what company he's with, where he's from, and what his expertise is in, you can just rest assured knowing that this isn't some timeshare pitch. We want to help agencies, utilize web forms appropriately in their agency, when it comes to sales, service, claims, renewals, the whole kind of kit and caboodle with your agency. I'll also say this: if you're used to watching stuff, particularly with me where I'm hosting it, you'll see me share my screen. We'll probably jot a lot of stuff down. We'll take a lot of notes. We'll do some visuals, and this whole session is not going to be polished. We're doing this live, so there's bound to be mistakes. Hopefully not, knock on wood, with technology, delays in sharing our screen, all that good stuff. But while I let more folks populate in from the waiting room, I'm going to have Kurt just kind of give us the origin story, let us know who he is and what we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicholas. It's so great to be here. So great to see everybody. I am over on the East Coast. So 1 o'clock my time, just finished up lunch, 90 or so degrees here. So it's probably really cool for you guys out there. But we're sweltering over here. Kids just got back from soccer and are lounging on the couch with heat exhaustion. So I'm so happy to be here and happy to see everybody and talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, super passionate about forms, and have been for the past 5 or so years. So again, my name is Kurt Turnison. I am an insurance agent as well as an InsurTech owner. Name of the InsurTech is Risk Review, RISKREVU. And Nicholas mentioned that I'm an agency owner. The truth is I am not an agency owner. I didn't get a chance to clarify that with him. I am an—
we're done. Turn it off. We're done, everybody.
I'm an agent, an employee at an agency, and have been for 15 years, and have specialized in high net worth personal lines insurance. So, going back, origin story on this whole forms concept is 5 years ago. I had the opportunity to go through an educational program with one of our insurance carriers, Chubb Insurance. It was to obtain a designation called the Certified Advisor of Personal Insurance. And it was a year-long program done in conjunction with the Wharton School of Executive Education. And as part of that program, they had us work on a project. And the project could be anything. It was of our choosing. We could, do anything that was related to the insurance industry that would help improve the industry in some way. So as I was going through, researching different ideas, thinking about different ideas, I was thinking about the current environment at the time. Again, this is 2015. The InsurTech revolution was really steaming up at that point, getting hot. And so I love tech, so I was really into that. Also, customer experience was a buzzword at that time. Everybody was throwing around, how am I going to improve my customer experience? And so these were two of the things going through my mind: technology and customer experience, as I was trying to think about this project. And so those two things led me to, okay, in the high net worth space, how do I improve the customer experience using technology? And my answer to that, after lots of research, looking at the different stages of the journey, the customer journey, looking at marketing, looking at presentation, looking at proposals, looking at data gathering, information gathering, looking at communications, looking at all these different stages, I finally settled on data gathering. And why did I settle on data gathering? Because to me, I am almost a type A person, but I'm kind of in the middle. I'm a little intuitive or internal, but I also I'm very external as well. But I'm not a full type A personality. So I settled on data gathering because the time it took me to gather information for a new prospect, for example, if they were looking for a home, auto, umbrella, valuable articles, it could take up to an hour of my time, which also means an hour of their time. So it's 2 hours of time, just, what's your name? What's your date of birth? What's your VIN number? What's your, address? All of these mundane, tedious questions that, I was just asking over and over again for 10 years at that point. And so to me, it was very tedious. I didn't see a lot of value in it. Yes, I was able to, build a relationship with them through that conversation, but I didn't see the value of that particular relationship building task as high as some of the other ones. Like when you're delivering a solution, I thought delivering a solution, I was able to build a better relationship through that conversation. So I said, okay, data gathering is what I want to focus on. Now, how do I do the data gathering? How do I automate it? How do I use technology to do that? The immediate answer to that was smart forms or forms, using a digital form to help me collect that information. And so, throughout the course of that year, my project ended up being building a website that had smart forms designed to gather information from clients. So anyway, fast forward, finished the project, built the website. It was fine, it worked well. But from that, I found that I realized through making these forms and using them with clients that they worked and that clients really loved filling them out. I loved having them fill them out and I was saving a ton of time. Fast forward to today, where every month on a monthly basis, and I'm a power user, I've been using forms for 5 years now. I have 25 to 30, this month, 33 form submissions for all different types of situations. And I can't tell you the amount of time that it saves me as a producer and service person in the agency that I work with. We're talking 33 forms, at least 25 hours of time is saved between the scheduling, between the data collection, between organization and missing all this other stuff we'll get into. So I was loving it and I was saving a ton of time. So I went to the agency owners and I said, hey guys, I got this idea. I want to share my success with everybody else in the industry. And that's where Risk Review came about. So we ended up hiring developers and putting together this platform where we build smart forms for everybody else to use, whether it's for renewals, service, sales, and what have you. And so that's where we are today. And I don't want to get too long in the tooth in the origin story, but I am still a producer, mainly a producer today. I've been in the sales role for the 15 years. I've been in service roles as well, where I handle all manner of service transactions. And so today, what I really want to dive into with everybody is help you understand, what smart forms are, number one, how they can help you in your agency, where they can help you in your agency. It's not just for sales, these are for service people too. And what the use cases are, and how you can integrate these into your own practice. Obviously, as Nicholas said, this is not a sales pitch. There's lots of solutions out there to build smart forms, and I know most of them. So I want to share all that information with you to make your journey a lot shorter than 5 years. So you can pick it up today and you can start using smart forms next week or the week after. Because, in my experience, and yes, it is my experience, but in my experience, if I didn't have smart forms today, I wouldn't know where I'd be. I would be a lot further back than I am today. So, so I'm going to pause there, and I don't know, Nicholas, if you want to kick off with something.
Yeah, I think I'm going to share my screen here. So I think this is typical. We were talking a little bit about this before we let people in is, the question that you and I, or that you asked before we started here was, do you think a lot of agents, and I'm paraphrasing, a lot of agents are using forms on their website? And I said, well, I think a lot of agents have forms because they have a website provider that just slapped a quote form on there. So a lot of agents, they have their website, and on their website, is some generic form that has, 15,000 different questions on it, or worse, it has like 2 questions on it. Like, get a quote, and it's like name and email and phone. And anybody who sees that form, they know there's nothing that's, I mean, anybody with that has the IQ above a raisin is going to say, I'm not getting a quote from that. And so what you're talking about is, and so going back, I think a lot of agents have forms, but they're not utilizing them really to their fullest, or it's very limited implementation. It's just kind of there because it checks a box. And what we're going to be talking about today is how to put forms on your website that tie into different aspects of the business, whether it's sales, service, renewals, claims, and the like, and then using that, and then taking that data and doing something with it, either in the hands of a producer, or even in some other part of technology, some sort of automation platform. It's utilizing forms to really, to your point, kind of save a lot of time. So that's what we're going to break down today, and that's what we're going to show and talk about, and things that you can take away and start to implement today in your agency, so that all that stuff is easy. So yeah, I guess, Kirk, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here, and let's dive right into it. We got past all the introductions, we got everybody in from the waiting room. Let's go.
Awesome. Yeah, and Nicholas, on that point, yes, a lot of folks and agencies have forms today. And this is something that I did a lot of thought through and research on, is why don't they use those forms? And I think the reason is because they're generic. So 2 things about our business that are really important: trust and relationship, right? So that's how we build sales. That's how we build COIs. So when you, as a producer, as a service person, are trying to build trust and relationships, and you want to use a digital form in that process, but then when you need to use a digital form, you're going to a generic form on your website that, when someone fills it out and submits it, it goes back to, I don't know, one person at the agency who just takes in all of those submissions. So the producer doesn't know when it comes back. They can't get back to that client or COI and say, hey, I received your submission. Thank you so much for filling that out. And number 2, it's not branded to that person. It's branded to the agency. So, when you're thinking about implementing a form solution, something to really focus in on is having one that brands the agent, the service person, with a picture of them or their name or somehow, and also where the form submission comes back directly to them. Okay, instead of going through a central, person that's going to redistribute it. And that's for 2 reasons. Number 1, customer experience. It's going to be faster because it's going right back to the person who sent the form out. And number 2, it's just efficient, for all the people in the agency. So
do you have like a live example? So when you say like a branded form, is there anywhere where I can go on my on a website, whether it's an agency or anywhere where you have an example of that?
Well, risk review, that's how we designed them, because as I said, through my research, that was what needed to happen. So I can show you that. And that shows a picture of the agent. And let's see.
Well, do you have one, say, like on your agency website that I can go to?
On my agency website, no, I don't. Our agency website is in the process of being redone.
Gotcha.
So let's see if I can pull up something here.
I just want to give people kind of a visual as to what when you say like a branded one, or when you say smart form. I think we, as marketers, we put words like smart in front of things. I think sometimes it gives the connotation that they're magic.
Yes.
They're not. They don't sing the national anthem and do burpees. They are, they're formed still. So,
Right.
I just giving people kind of an idea visually so they can kind of see what it is that we're talking about here.
Sure. All right, so this is an example of one of my forms, okay, that I use. And here you have a picture of the agent, branded to the agency, and then the form on the left-hand side. Okay, so pretty straightforward. But again, when someone fills this out, they hit the submit button all the way down, they hit submit, that information is coming right back to me. Okay, and there's other solutions out there that'll do that too. Typeform is an example, typeform.com, and FormStack as well is another example. But that's how that looks.
Gotcha. And so that's just a URL on like an embedded form on a on your website, or something that you can put it like in an email signature, or you could put into your automation platforms that just kind of send that stuff out so you can collect that information.
Right.
And this is really important too, I think, because one of the things, and working kind of in the insurance marketing or lead space, a lot of times people will get leads and they'll say, well, these are low intent leads, these aren't very good leads, whatever the case is. And when someone fills out all that information, I always tell them, it's really hard to tell me that's not a really high intent lead. And so you're collecting all that data. They didn't just, they weren't sitting on the couch watching Bill Cosby episodes, just filling that in willy-nilly because they were bored. They were doing it because they have a level of intent. And I think that, being intentional with the information that you're collecting on these forms, going above and beyond just the name, address, and phone number, then I think that, you can really start to segment your customers and your prospects, or however things are doing service requests, in a different type of order. Absolutely.
No, it's a good point. Low intent versus high intent. I love the terminology. Certainly, when someone fills out a form incomplete, you got a real live prospect on the line.
Yeah.
If they only fill out 5 or 6 fields, there's not a lot of commitment there. So certainly that does make a difference as far as, where you choose to spend your time as a producer or even a service person. So back to that previous thought that you mentioned, which is limited implementation. And I see this in my own practice. When I started using smart forms, I maybe had 5 or 6 submissions a month. So it ramps up. But what it takes is leadership, some sort of leadership within the agency that says, okay, yeah, not only did we purchase this solution and create this solution, but we're going to mandate that it gets used in these certain situations. Without that leadership from the top, it just doesn't happen. And it could be a team member that leads it. A captain on a personal or commercial lines team that leads the implementation. But there has to be that person that takes that first step and really says, hey, this is working well for me. And I remember in my agency, when that happened, it was people looked at me like, oh, it's just Kurt, of course he's doing it. But when it was someone else that took over and started really pushing that forward as well, that's when everybody started to jump on board. So it does take a cheerleader to really say, hey, everybody, this is working, before it does become universal. And, I'll tell you, once it does become universal, we have agencies that are submitting between 60, say it's an agency between, 10 and 20 employees. If they're submitting 60 to 100 forms per month, they're saving between 40 and 60 hours per month, of time. That's almost a full-time employee. Sure. Just in this data gathering aspect.
Sure. And the magic isn't in the data that you gather, it's what you do with the data and the processes that you put in place after you get that data. Question for you from Dan Muir here. He wants to know, would you use these forms for the renewal process? I use Canopy Connect or Xylo. What's the difference between your smart forms and the ones that I use?
So great questions. Let's see. Would you use these forms in a renewal process? Yes. So let's hit that one first and then hit the other two. So Nicholas mentioned earlier that you can use forms for sales, service, renewals, and claims. And I would say even beyond that. Sure. So and this is where I get really excited, because anything where you're collecting information from anyone, that's where you can use a form. Anytime there's a repeatable process, that's where you can use a digital form. It even could be internal between employees. If you have an HR department and you need to collect information for time off or for a party that you're throwing, that's where a digital form can come into play. But renewal process, definitely. So there's renewal questionnaires. One of the things that for 10 years, I was always like, how do we implement a renewal questionnaire process so that we can engage with clients at renewal, get updated risk information so that we can make sure that they're better protected and possibly sell additional lines of coverage. So yes, definitely at renewal. Nicholas?
I'm gonna let you answer the last part of that question, but I have a follow-up question to that on the renewal process.
Oh, great. Yeah. So definitely on renewal. And even with some of these carriers, they have supplemental applications that they want us to fill out at renewal. And, like on product liability, there's a foreign manufacturer supplemental, and for example, if your company is now manufacturing in France and you need to get that supplemental, use a form to gather that information immediately at renewal. Your client will appreciate it because you don't have to coordinate a schedule, meeting, and they could just fill it out on their own time and call you if they have an issue. So definitely for renewals, I did one the other day. Chubb wanted a wine questionnaire filled out because a client added $200,000 in wine. It's like 20 questions. Like, come on, really? But that is a form. That series of questions that underwriter took and retyped into their email, that turned into a digital form and is now being used. So yes, definitely at renewal. Sales, absolutely. When you're selling, and there's two parts to sales. There's prospect sales and there's current client sales. And each one is different. With prospect sales, you're collecting more information. How did you hear about us? What's your occupation? What's your date of birth? But with clients, you already know a lot of that stuff. So you don't need to ask it again. And that, and if you do, it reduces the client experience. So there's two sets of forms there. There's one for the client, one for the prospect. So definitely in sales, and there's sales too that are multiple line sales, like package sales, business package, personal package. And then there's single line sales because a client could call in and just say, hey, Dan, I'm buying a house tomorrow. What do you need from me? Or, hey, Sally, I'm buying a car tomorrow. What do you need from me? I want to put my auto insurance with you. So there's all these different permutations of these things, and each one could be a form. Service, I love forms for service. My favorite one is when you're adding a car to a policy. It's like typically we'd have to call the dealer or ask the client, what's the year, make, model? What's the VIN? What's the purchase price? Send me a window sticker. Are you trading in another car? What's the lien holder? These are all questions that should be in a form. And my favorite one is to send it to the dealer. Just take the client out of it, improve the client experience by saving them time, and just say, hey, what's the dealer's email address? And just shoot the dealer an email to the form, and then they fill it out. They'll do it quickly because they want the binder and paid receipt. So service too, and there's umpteen service use cases that you can use forms for. Mortgage verification requests if they're refinancing or buying a house, and so on. And then there's internal, like an issuance form. If you have a producer and a marketing team that's working together to issue policies, there's a communication there that needs to be spot on in order to get those policies accurate. And so, maybe you already have an issuance form, but it's a Word document or it's something else. Turn that into a smart form, and you can streamline that conversation like no other. We've saved so much time in terms of errors back and forth between the producer and the marketing team because of that one form. So overarching, yes, and claims too. Same thing on claims, glass claims, towing claims, general liability, whatever it is. There can be a form either designed specifically for it or generally for it. And what I mean by that is you can have a general form that uses conditional logic to accomplish many things, right? So the general form can say, okay, what type of claim is this, personal or commercial? If it's personal, then it asks these questions. If it's commercial, it asks these questions.
So before we get into the conditional logic aspect of things, because I think that's a whole different ball game, I want to ask a question here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a question that way, because I think you'll probably have to spend a moment to kind of pull up an example or show something. And then I'm going to answer Aaron's question and Jeff's question, or I'm going to answer Aaron's question after that while you're looking that up. But the question I have is, you mentioned renewal forms and using forms for renewal. what type of questions are you asking for on the renewal form? And, what was the thought process in asking those particular questions and maybe not asking other questions? If you can maybe, and you could pick any line of business, whether it's personal lines or commercial lines, whatever you pull from. Maybe you want to show an example of both, but what sort of questions are you asking on that form? And while you pull that up, I'm going to answer Aaron's question. Aaron wants to know, we got 3 people in the waiting room. Let's let those folks in. Aaron wants to know, you referenced the forms that I was using, and I made it a requirement to make customers use forms particularly for service. If you wanted to make a change in our agency on any line of business, you had to give it to me in writing. So your question is you said, I know you're very good at this, training your customers to use the forms. You haven't been able to wrap your head around it. How did I get past this? So I've heard a lot of agents over the years tell me, like, well, my community, people in my community, they're not as tech savvy. They're not going to fill this stuff out. I've heard those objections. And just to kind of preface what I would do, anytime someone called in and said, hey, I want to add a car to my policy, I need to take a driver off, I need to do X, Y, Z on my policy, we would direct them to our website and to fill out a service form. That service form went into a couple places. It went to our service team. It went into our CRM, and it went into our agency intercommunication Slack channel. So everybody got notified, and we would require that. If someone said, well, can I just give you the information over the phone? I said, no, we can't. So this is where the objections come up. Or, why can't I just give it to you? Why can't I just say it? Why can't I do X, Y, Z? Now, if they came in the office, we would do that. That's a different story. But most times people weren't coming into any office. And I would always give them a few different answers depending on where they were going. First, I would train people in our new client onboarding. Hey, if you need to do a service request, this is how you're going to do service. So I would put that a part of my agency onboarding. And it was a specific, it was agency name /support. And it was front and center on our website. It was a separate page, and we put that in our onboarding. We made that pretty well known. And if they said any objection, I would tell them, well, we have to for a few reasons. Number one, it's to protect you and me. I have to get things in writing. Just like if I was trying to buy a house or do any sort of anything legal, it's contractual. I have to get it in writing. You understand that. It's to protect you so that we don't make any mistake and that we don't have to mess up on anything, and you're protected. Sometimes I would throw in I would blame it on somebody else. I'd say, I'm licensed by the Department of Insurance. I hold my license with them. If they ever found out I wasn't getting things in writing, it's the government, man. It's government regulation. It's part of our industry. I'd blame the government as a boogeyman, which I have no problem doing in most cases of my life. And then I would also tell them, we get a lot of requests. We want to be able to, prioritize things. We don't want things slipping through the cracks. You don't want that because we don't want to mess up on anything. So it should take you 5 seconds. It's going to ask you all the questions that we need answers to, and away we go. We'll get that done. And then also by tracking that, by having it in writing and tying it to a CRM or to anything else, we were able to send out automated notifications on things. So letting them know when it was done. So that's how I got around it. I just didn't make it an option. Now, I'll throw a caveat to that because, every once in a while you get the 98-year-old grandma who still has her driver's license and she's like, I just want to add a car. I don't have the internet. That happens. And so what I would do is I'd say, great. And I'd just ask for the questions and put it in a form. But that was sparingly, don't make that allowance for everybody because then you make that allowance for everybody. So that's how we answered that. Jeff wants to know, have you ever created a form before, and you can show this after you show the renewal thing, but have you ever created a form that can map out to a carrier supplemental app?
Have I ever? No, I have not. No,
Okay.
That's a good question. And it can be done, obviously, but I personally have not.
Okay.
Let me show you. I'm going to share my screen again. And back on that, what you're saying there is how do you handle when someone has a service request? And I'm a little less strict about it, but it's been really interesting. I
was super strict on it. It wasn't happening.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think that's awesome because it definitely does lead to those benefits. But I've been giving people the option in many situations where I say, hey, great to talk to you. We can collect the data one of two ways. We can spend the next 20 minutes answering questions over the phone, or I can send you a link to a form.
Here's where it came down for me, Aaron. I remember visually, and I remember everything about when I had this kind of light bulb moment. I was driving down the street and I needed to make an appointment for my kid to go see his pediatrician. I tried calling the hospital and saying, can I make an appointment? And they said, no, you can't do it this way. You got to do it this way. You got to go on to this website and you got to do it this way. And you know what I did? I remember hanging up going, I wasn't upset at all.
Right.
Because they made it very easy. They made it very simple. They explained how it works. They didn't put a lot of, there wasn't any obstacles. They made it easy and they explained it well. And they said, this is how we do it.
Right.
And I said, well, I remember hanging up going, well, of course I just can't call up the hospital and make an appointment. This is a big hospital. That's not how they work. And that's where it came to my head. Well, then I need to be doing this with our service. You just can't call up and say, I need to do X. No, you don't do. People don't do that with lawyers. They don't do that with the people they buy houses from. They don't do that with their doctors. They don't do it with their bank. Why should we do it as insurance professionals? We're working with contractual risk. And so just make it easy, make it simple. Say, I'm going to send you a link right now via text or whatever. Just go ahead and click that out. It's going to ask you all the right questions. It's going to take you 15 seconds. We're going to get it all correct and we'll get it done for you. And so I think that's how you get around that objection. So
yeah, I agree. And I was only going to say that most times people chose to do the form when given the option. So I think I like your solution though. It's very good. Okay, so here's the renewal questionnaires that we have. And the question was, how do you decide which questions to put into the form, right? Because there's umpteen. I mean, I've gone through the ERMI questionnaires, and there's 1,000 questions, and they're so detailed and really well done. But when I am designing a form, it's also, I think, important to think, okay, about the customer experience. What information are they going to have readily available? What information is going to be 99% of the time relevant or irrelevant, and really focus in on those types of issues. What's really important to understand from a risk perspective, from the carrier's perspective, from our perspective. What do we want to understand? And so that's why I did it, because I didn't want to put 1,000 questions into a form and have 800 of them never being answered, and have nobody ever get through the form. So basically, here's an example of an annual personal risk evaluation, which is same as a personal renewal questionnaire. In this form, they can review up to 2 homes, 1 home, secondary home valuables, auto, and liability. They can remove a section if they don't have it by checking the checkbox. And then it kind of goes through the questions. Which home are we reviewing? Did you install an alarm system in the last 12 months? If so, what are the components? What risk mitigation strategies do you employ at the residence? Generator, water shutoff valve, gated home. Is your home in a trust or LLC? Have you done any updates, or are you planning any renovations? And if so, tell us about them. Have you done any updated the electrical, the plumbing, the heating, the windows? Has the occupancy status changed? Renting to a long-term tenant, so on and so forth. Would you like to obtain flood coverage? Do you have any business conducted at home? If so, tell us about it. And then, a text box to say anything else that's on their mind that they want to review with us. So there's that catch-all at the end of it.
How often do people just say in that text box, can you find something cheaper? How often does that come up?
5%, 10%. So
Yeah.
it comes up, but not every time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a concern as well of folks, when they're sending out renewal questionnaires that are actually going to be filled out. Is everybody going to just say reshop me?
Right.
Well, I guess it depends on the structure of your agency and how you've talked about renewals. And if you just say to everybody, renewal is a time to shop. And if that's the case, they're trained to do that. If that's not the case, they're not trained to do that. So I would say, in my experience, less than 10% is when they say that. Jewelry, tell us about what you've added, wine, fine art. Do you have any appraisals? They can upload appraisals, any valuables stored in a bank. What risk mitigation do you have? Any valuables owned by a trust? And then there's the automobile. Have you purchased anything in the last 12 months? Have you sold any vehicles? Any new drivers? Any drivers away at school?
So what it's happening is you're selecting yes, and it's populating the information because you said yes. That's what we talk about when we say conditional logic. It's
Exactly.
asking other questions based on the answers that the person's providing. If they say no, pretty safe to assume those boxes don't show up.
That's right.
Now, does this information, what would you say is the best practice? Because the question here is does it integrate with an AMS? Well, AMSs don't really integrate with a lot of things, and that's because they don't want to. But how are you getting this information back into your AMS, or what's the best practice or workflow for that?
So best practices depends on your AMS, depends on your workflows. But when you get information from a smart form, it's coming in a structured, organized, fashion. So it can be copied and pasted. It will most often come as an email. You'll get the data as an email or a PDF, so you can attach the PDF. If there is an integration, then you can set up the integration so the data gets sent directly to your AMS or your CRM.
If your AMS has Zapier and can receive inbound Zapier requests, then these can be zapped into your AMS, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yep.
AMS specific.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah, so you can use Zapier, which is an open API solution out there. I think their bottom price tier is $20 a month. And if you spend a couple hours with it, you'll be an expert in it. So it's a pretty straightforward solution.
I think he's on the call too. Is Casey Nelson on this call? I think I saw him. If you're not connected with Casey Nelson specializes in setting up Zaps for insurance agents. So reach out to Casey Nelson. He'll set it all up for you if you don't even want to mess with it. And he'll do that. Now, and if you have if you're utilizing a CRM, almost all the CRMs have the ability have a Zap integration. You can just push it right into your CRM. So if your CRM does certain things, you can utilize that as well. Jeff brings up a good question here. He wants to know, what do you do when someone wants to know about the premium change before making the change? I got this probably a third of the time. People say, well, what's it? I want to know what it costs first. And you tell me how you're handling that. Kurt, I'll say kind of how I handle that when people say, well, I want to know what it is before I add the car or add my kid. What do you find to be the case there?
So, I mean, if they want to know the premium first, I still use the form. I still need the data in order to get the accurate pricing. And so I think that's it, is just, great, happy to give you pricing, but in order for it to be accurate, I need the information first. Please complete the form. It'll take you 3 minutes or 15 seconds, whatever you want to say, and I'll get you accurate pricing. So, that's how I handle it.
Yeah, we would get that, like I said, about a third of the time. People would say, hey, I want to add my 16-year-old kid, and he drives, the brand new Mercedes, but I want to know what it is before I add him. They didn't think about that when they bought the brand new Mercedes, but they want to know. So that's obviously a pet peeve. But I would tell people it's kind of the same thing. Well, we need to get the information, but typically how our process works is when we see forms come in, we're on it because we want to make service happen fast for you. We want to make it so you're not waiting. Our service team is waiting, willing, and able to make this change for you. But Mr. Jones, I will let them know when it comes in that we want to send an email. They're going to send you an email first with the premium difference, and you're going to say yes or no in writing, so that we can track all that and have it all there. So we would make exceptions in that case. We would say, well, don't worry about it. If I understand, you don't want to be shocked. We don't want to get sticker shock with a $400 a month increase. So we will let you know what it is first. But to Kurt's point, we would tell them we need the information. I can't just go off of your make model. I need VIN number. I need, I got to key that into underwriting it, and I would blame I'd blame underwriting it. Underwriters got to look at it, so they're going to need the VIN numbers and the driver's license number and all that good stuff. So, well,
and a good thing to say here as we're talking about this is disclosures and consumer disclosures, disclaimers and consumer disclosures. So anytime we do something, work with a new prospect and a new policy, we're supposed to be telling them, hey, we're going to run your reports with the CLUE department, and we're going to run an MVR, we're going to get your credits, your IBS, whatever it is. But how often do we actually do that? I mean, I'll speak for myself, very rarely. But with the form, it's right there. You can put it right there on it. They have to check a box saying that they agree to it. And so you have that consumer disclosure being done in every transaction. And that disclosure, so there's two things, a disclosure, disclaimer and a consumer disclosure. The disclaimer says the information used in this form is just meant to gather information. Nothing will happen as a result of you filling out this form except us receiving your information. So that's number one. And number two is the consumer disclosure saying, it depends on the form, but for sales forms, car, auto, home, whatever it is, we're going to use this information to obtain pricing from insurance carriers. In order to do that, we have to run an MDR and we have to run a clue report and an insurance score. And so, you're checking that box, they're checking that box, making sure that that's done as well. So it's a nice thing to have that's automated.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I want to share my screen here after this, but after that, people would sometimes come back and they'd say, maybe you've heard this before, they'd say, well, I don't have to do that with Geico. Geico doesn't make me do all that. I could just, call them up and say, add my 16-year-old kid to the Mercedes. And I always go, yeah. And I would show them reports on, and I'd have like a full deck of horror stories of people who I would screenshot things for people. If you just search in like Geico on Twitter or Geico, things like that, I would show them screenshots of all the people who had claims denied and had, issues. And I'd say, and this is what you get with that. We're professionals. This is why you work with us. We're not in a call center in another country or wherever. We are professionals. And we're going to do this job right so that if and when it happens, you're covered. And so, things like that.
And to dovetail, I'm glad you mentioned Geico because that was part of my research as well, is that Geico is super successful, right? And people like their customer experience. And what is their customer experience? It's all web-based, right? And so you have middle market, you have high net. As I said, my specialty is high net worth. I have lots of clients that do business with Geico and they do their auto with Geico because it's so easy and the rates are so low. Well, take a page out of their book and say, well, if people like that customer experience from the middle market to the super high net worth, well, why aren't we doing, as agents? And that was kind of an aha moment for me. It's like, I go to Geico's website, I filled out a form and 5 minutes later, I have a quote, which is great, but why can't I do that with an independent agent? And so that's where the smart forms can really help bring that customer experience to the next level.
So let's talk a little bit about best cases where agents, because I think it can be very overwhelming. I think, and I know this because I'm guilty of it as well. I'll sit down and I'll think, well, yeah, I want to do forms. Okay, what are all the forms I need to do? And I'll think of 75 different forms I need to make and start using. And because of that, I have trouble implementing like the most important ones. And so let's go off of the premise that a lot of agency owners, a lot of agents are either A, using real generic forms, just like, hey, get a quote and basic contact information, or B, that they're not using anything at all. Like, what are the forms that they should start with first? Like, what are the most popular use cases? In my opinion, you tell me where I'm wrong if these need to be reordered. I said getting new business is important. People are coming to your website because they're shopping. And so you need to make a very smart, intuitive, well-designed, easy experienced form for collecting those new leads. And then I put service because you're going to tell people to come back for service requests. Do you agree with 1 and 2? And if you do, like what are 3, 4, 5, and 6? Like where should people be implementing first?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get even more granular when you talk about new business. I think home, if you're, obviously if you're doing personal lines, home is number 1. That's our most popular form.
Okay.
Auto, obviously number 2.
Let's go back to the home. When people do you find it better to give this information to a loan officer first or to a consumer? Like where are you seeing most people filling this information out? Because I can see a lot of use cases around a referral partner filling this stuff out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole nother conversation around marketing when you're talking about form use, cross-selling, doing a campaign to 1,000 clients with a link to an auto form. And you get 50 or 60 submissions back, overnight. So yeah, absolutely. But new quote forms, package forms, a package form that collects home, auto, umbrella, valuables, watercraft, all in the same form is extremely popular and saves a ton of time. So those two, watercraft, is a very common add-on policy. So if you have a current client, so I would say current client watercraft policy or form designed to be sent to an existing client is a big one. And on the service side, like I said, the new vehicle form to be designed around the dealer, to be sent to the dealer.
Is it a new, let's specify it, new or new/replace vehicle?
New/replace, right? But for an existing client, right? So you already have an auto policy. We're just adding or replacing a car.
Okay.
Yep. The mortgage verification request, so you can send it to the bank, and because you're in a closing, right, with a client, and they say, okay, we're closing on June 21st, and you say, okay, give me the mortgage person's email address. You send the mortgage person a link to the form, they fill it out, give you the lien holder information. Legal entity form, if you have clients putting homes into trusts, and there's a supplemental for that, that's very helpful. The claim forms are also very popular, glass claims, and general auto claims for personal lines are very, very common as well on the service side.
I think on the service side too, new/replace car, but also information, forms around adding or replacing drivers. And asking the questions such as, do they qualify for a goods discount? All of those things that you would want to ask them in a conversation, which car they're driving, if they're, depending on your state and how insurance is written. In California, it's not credit based, so it's mileage based. So adding a car, how many miles a year is it driven? And getting that in writing. And that was really big. So I'll speak to California because, a lot of folks aren't too familiar with this. In California, they don't go off credit. And they haven't for as long as I've ever written insurance. It's miles driven. How many miles a year is the car being driven? And so here's what a lot of agents would do. I know nobody on this call ever did this because you guys are, much better than this. But people were, and gosh, can't believe people did this. They were saying cars were being driven like 1,000, like there's 4 drivers and 1 car, and the car's being driven 1,000 miles a year, right? And that's what agents were doing. And so insurance companies I know that nobody ever does that. Insurance companies started to get wise to this because they're like, well, this is not right. This is horrible. And so they would either make like minimums, or they would, you had to like verify. They was doing different verifications and telematics and all these things that they were doing to verify mileage because they were realizing how much money they were losing. And so what would happen is I would start asking specifically on the form, how many miles a year are you driving? And they would put that in the form. Now, whether or not they were right, and I asked for odometer too and date. So I had odometer and I asked for a specific number. So if they said 89,327, I was like, okay, that's pretty specific. Date that, I knew the date that it was captured, and then how many miles a year that they drove. And so the next year, and we did this on renewals, we did this on service, we would ask those questions so that when carriers would come back and they'd say, no, we need to elevate that mileage to 15K. I'd say, well, hey, whoa, buddy, I got documented proof here from the customer. The customers, I got odometer readings, I got everything. And so it helped not just from a risk standpoint, from an E&O standpoint, all of that, I was able to get it in writing. So ask those questions. I know I went on a tangent there. So add or replace car, add or replace driver, ask the driver questions, all of that good stuff. I think everything else was pretty, on the homes, change deductibles, all that stuff.
That's a good point too, is a lot of, do you make a decision when you're designing your forms? Do you want to ask coverage questions? Like what limits do you want? Do you want this deductible?
So here's what I would always say. We would put a disclaimer on on that form. We said, our recommendation is X and we're going to do X. And so when it came to like deductibles, we would kind of put on there what we suggest, and then we would also dummy it down and say higher deductible means lower premium, because in our agency we were a fan of higher liability limits, high deductibles. You don't need to have a $250 deductible. Why do you have a $250 deductible? You don't need that. That was our thing, and that's what we would do. So we would have those disclaimers on there. We would tell people what we were doing. And so it was in writing and present there as a disclaimer.
And just so you know, my thought process on this too, which is a little different, is the forms are all about gathering risk information, so that we as the agent can make decisions and design insurance for the customer, right? So I wasn't all about putting in different coverage options.
No,
like
I don't tell them. I tell them what we're doing. I tell them what we're doing. We're doing 500,000 standard liability. We're doing $1,000 deductible. That's what we're doing, unless you say, and we didn't let them change.
Unless you say otherwise, right?
We didn't change the liability ever. But if they said, well, I want a $500 deductible, okay, we'll do that. But it was, hey, this is what we do. This is why we're doing it, and it was kind of our CYA.
Right. But it along the same lines is sometimes you ask for declarations pages. And that's great. Declarations are an excellent source of information, but it's not everything, and the previous agent might not have done the right job on that.
Yeah, it's not, people would say, I want apples to apples. And I'd say, look, what if that apple's rotten? You don't want that apple. That's a rotten apple. Right.
So you're getting clean data, accurate data directly from the client and what their perspective is on things. So I think that's an important distinction too. When you're designing these forms, is you want to get information that is really going to help you design your proposals.
Other type of form. So new quote, new service. What else should agents?
So we were talking about renewals. We call them risk evaluations because you can use them at other times besides renewal, but they're similar to renewal. I say it's forms designed to gather updated risk information. Okay, so whether it's about the car, the home, the boat, the yacht, the business, the wood stove questionnaire.
And let's be honest here, because we're all insurance agents. Let's just be real about this. The benefit, you want them to fill that out, but the benefit, strong benefit, is that when a claim happens, you can say, we send this out every year. We ask them for this information. You have documented proof from an E&O standpoint that you're doing your job. You're sending it to, hopefully you've got a system that sends it to everybody. You're asking everybody, and you're performing the tasks. But you can't get in trouble for asking and following up for people. Did you replace the roof in the last year? Do you have any new? Is there anything that? Do
you want earthquake coverage? Do you want flood coverage?
And so when they come back and say someone stole my wedding, my $25,000 wedding ring out of our house, you can say, well, we've been asking you about that.
You didn't tell us about it. Right?
We've been asking you about that. And not that you want to sound like a jerk, but I mean, there is an element of this. I'm always scared from like the litigation standpoint and the E&O standpoint. That's why, hey, we've been asking you. We sent it to you by email. I have analytics that says that you open the email.
Right.
You put it. I even got your form that says no. Like, I don't know.
Well, and the other side of the coin, Nicholas, is the customer experience. It's like if you're an agency and you have 5,000 clients and you have a staff of 20 people, there's no way that those people can reach out to every single one of those clients to say, let's do a renewal review, let's do a renewal questionnaire together. And maybe you're sending it by mail. Maybe, that's great, but I don't know many people that are doing that. So the customer experience side of it is, okay, you can automate the delivery of a renewal questionnaire 30 to 60 days ahead of every single renewal on your book of business, and create a touch point, a very valuable touch point that could lead to better underwriting, cross-selling and upselling of additional lines, depending on how the form is designed. And we have questions in our form that says, are you building a house? Are you buying a home? Are you getting married? Did you have a child? All these different things that are triggers for other conversations. Are you taking a vacation, a big vacation? Let's talk about travel insurance. So you can automate this stuff today.
It gives you the opportunity to uncover new opportunities, for sure.
Right.
When they say, I've got X, you ask them about new drivers, or you ask them about it. You put your insurance agent hat on and you're able to analyze risk and create new opportunities from there as well. I put cross-selling down here as a cross-selling form. Would you say that's for, or would you say that there's something else that people should be utilizing?
Cross-selling forms, I mean, and I would just say, because there's two types of forms. There's package forms and there's individual line forms, right? And so if you're looking to do a cross-selling campaign, like sell umbrellas to every one of your clients who doesn't have an umbrella, right? Just create a form that collects the information you need for an umbrella policy and send it to 700 people. And you're cross-selling that, and that brings to mind, there's this company, Aureus Analytics, that does data analysis on your book of business, and it helps identify these types of solutions or these types of opportunities. So, there's other solutions out there that can help us identify those solutions. And then
look in your AMS, look in your CRM, look in your CRM and run a report for everybody that has auto and home and no umbrella.
Right.
There you go. I mean, that's how you do it.
No watercraft, no ATV, whatever the case is.
Yeah,
and then develop a form.
They've got a boat, no umbrella.
Right.
Yeah, they got a motorcycle and no life insurance.
Right.
Right. Easy peasy. Right.
Yep.
And so, well, cool.
Sky's the limit. Once you start, you start easy, right? And bring it back to like the basics. Is you start easy with smart forms, and do a home, do an auto, do a business owner's package policy, and just start easy. And then as you start to use those and your team uses them, you'll see the benefits, the time savings. Quick case study: we did agency of 8 people using smart forms for 3 months. They used like 16 different smart forms. There was one campaign to update their database that generated like 1,200 responses. So that was a big time savings. But out of all of those, they say the total form submissions was something like 1,600 forms in 3 months, and they saved 466 hours, estimated, just by changing their workflow from, okay, let's have a conversation and let me gather this information from you on the phone or in person, to let me send you a link. So
what would you say are the biggest? We've talked about the do's. What would you say are the biggest don'ts when it comes to utilizing forms on a website? What should people avoid and just don't do it? Learn from experience, learn from someone else's pain. Don't do these things.
That's a great question, and I haven't put too much thought to it.
I got one.
You got one? Good. You go first. I'll think of something.
Yeah. The biggest problem, and I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, don't ask a million questions on one form. And what I mean by that is, let's be honest here. You send someone a form, they've got 75 questions on it. They're not too excited to fill a lot of that out. So what you do is you break it into pieces. What you do is you use conditional logic. You ask 1 or 2 questions at a time. I think that's a better use case. If you send me a form and I got all this, I'm going, holy smokes, that's a lot of work. I'm gonna probably do it. I'm probably not too excited about doing it, or I'm gonna be doing it on my own time and procrastinate. Who knows if that ever happens? Ask fewer questions up front. Depending on the type of form that you're doing, don't, and this is particular to like new lead forms, new quotes, don't ask for contact information up front. And this might be some point, you might look at me currently, you might say, I don't really agree with this, but this is just my experience. I don't ask, if it's someone who doesn't know who we are from a new lead perspective, I'm not asking for, hey, what's your name, email, phone number? Because what's the first thing that goes through their head? Great, I'm gonna get spammed to death. I can't unsubscribe from this quickly enough, and I haven't even gotten an email. And so don't ask for that information up front. Ask the questions that are intent questions or a different data point questions, and then ask for that information towards the end is a better practice for lead generation. On the other forms, try to ask fewer questions on the front end. I would always say, and I'd always tell our team and in our forms, I want to ask the obvious, but I don't need to get, like, if it doesn't matter, if I'm going to talk to them anyways, or if there's going to be some other point of follow-up, I don't need to ask the question. I'll give you an example. Like something that's super granular that just doesn't matter, but you're asking it. It's not an underwriting thing. I saw people ask on their forms, like, how many doors on the car? Who cares? Like, that's not, who cares about that? So don't ask things that you don't really need, and that will help. Think about, keeping it concise. Like if you can get away with, under 12 questions. I think that's really good. And those are some of my don'ts for forms. Your thoughts?
Well, I would add, don't wait. If you're not using forms today, I think it's something that should go to, the close to the top of the list based on my experience, because the amount of time it's going to save is amazing. And from the E&O perspective, the benefits you're going to get, your team morale will be much better because producers are not being yelled at because they didn't get specific information. Policies will be, issued correctly. It's all about procedures and processes and having a consistent procedure and process, for your people to follow and for your customers to experience. So, in my opinion, implementing a form solution for sales and service is a mission critical type activity in today's environment.
Yep, I would agree. Now I know we're running up on an hour here. I don't know what people's bandwidth is. I want to be as respectful as we can. So what I'll say is, what's one last, tactical thing that people should be implementing, and then let us know, or let the people know, like if they want to check out what you're doing with risk review, how they would go about doing that.
One last tactical. Tactical, I think, is just as leaders of your organizations, is making sure your people know that it's okay with you to send people to a form.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that they're not used to doing, they might not feel comfortable sending a form to a client to collect information. But if they hear from the leadership that says, this is awesome, this is the way we want to do it, I want you to do it, and I'll help you send your first one, then that's the tactical, is just having that encouragement and that support for your team to use forms, to gather information. And that's you telling them your time is more valuable to me and to the world than just asking name, date of birth, and VIN numbers.
Aaron wants to know, have you ever tried these with commercial? And I guess maybe give some use.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you find that they work better on commercial versus personal lines, or vice versa?
Same. It's people today, they want to do things better, faster, smarter, right? And so that's why they go to Amazon. That's why they go to Zappos. That's why they do it Bank of America, and they scan their checks because it's better, faster, and smarter. So smart forms, people recognize this is a process. This is well thought out. It's professional. This is something that they're taking me through a modern process, and they appreciate it. So absolutely, on the commercial, there's so many applications. You talk about big commercial too. When they have to do these big renewals and risk evaluations, there's lots of applications there as well. We have a specialty practice that works with doctors all over the country. And every year they have to do these certain forms, turn it into a smart form. Very, very simple, but saves a ton of time.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up to that, and then I'll ask his question here. Do you find that there are certain niches that forms work better with versus, hey, maybe not so much with this, or a different segment of commercial, whether it's middle market, whether it's small commercial? Are there certain use cases where it's better versus you kind of maybe need to adopt something different here?
It's a great question. And I think that smart forms is a tool, right? And so I would pose that question back to whoever is looking to implement smart forms, for them to look at their current process with a commercial client or a personal process and think about where the smart form can be injected and where there's that repeatable process that can be made more efficient with a smart form. And you're going to find success if you do that analysis.
I would imagine too, like if you're talking about middle market, there's multiple people involved with this. Maybe you're dealing with a controller or a CFO or a CEO, and there's HR. Like there's other people that might have to input information. Do you have a way that you can send it to multiple people, or it can kind of round robin, almost like a DocuSign? And hey, this controller filled in their portion. Now the CFO's got to fill in their portion.
Right. It's all, the feature is like a saving feature where you can save your progress and then share that progress form with somebody else. Absolutely. In my business, I work with family offices and wealth managers. And so the process is, here you go, wealth manager, I've partially filled out the form. Please share this with your client. They share it with the client. The client fills out their portion, sends it back to the wealth manager. They fill out their portion. So you can have multiple people involved in this process as well. Yeah.
Aaron's follow-up question. Sorry, I cut you off there, Aaron, to interject what I was doing. But he said, here's my issue. We are trying with pest control as a niche, but the carrier forms are crazy long. I made an online form, as Nick said, but it's too daunting.
Yeah. So my perspective, and I started with very short forms, 12 questions or less, right? And that was my first year or so using smart forms. At some point, I just said, I'm going to add a few more questions and see how it works.
Yeah, test it.
It was fine. And today, and Nick, maybe you won't like this, but some of our forms have 200 plus questions in them, including conditional logic to streamline the process.
Depends on who you send it to. I mean, you know, depends on.
And that's a good point, because cold leads that are coming off of, you know, a cold marketing campaign probably aren't going to be as willing to give you as much information as a warm lead or a trusted client, right? So if I'm sending a form to a referral from a trusted referral source, they're very likely to fill out the entire thing as accurately as possible. But if it's a very cold lead from a cold list, then maybe not, right? Yeah. So it depends who you're sending it to.
Your forms integrate with WordPress?
Yes.
Fantastic. Where can people find out more information about Risk Review and learn more about what your offering is?
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Kurt Turnison. And our website is riskreview.com. It's RISKREVU.com.
I'll put that down here in the chat as well, so you guys can check that out. If you guys want to take a look at Kirk's forms, take a look. They integrate. I saw them, riskreview.com, correct?
Riskreview.com. Yep.
Yeah, I took a look at them. Helps if I send it to everybody, not just Stuart Ferris. Sorry, Stuart. Yeah, I took a look at them, and they're sharp. And if you don't want to spend all the time to build your own forms and you just want to plug and play stuff and have kind of nice branding, it's a great solution. So cool. Any last tips, any last questions that you guys want to ask tactically or anything about forms or implementation or utilization of them, what you shouldn't do, how you should think about them? Feel free. We'll stay on for about another minute or so. I will put this replay on our YouTube channel. So I'll, anybody who registered, I'll send you guys the replay link. You guys can watch the replay if I saw some people on phones and you're doing work, go figure. So we'll put this replay out for everybody who wants to watch it. So any last questions before we go?
And certainly if anybody has questions specifically for me, feel free to hit me up. Email is kurt@riskreview.com, KURT@riskreview.com.
Would you say the best way is to email or connect with you on LinkedIn?
Email.
Okay. Say your email one more time. I'm gonna or put it down here in the chat if you would. So if people want to grab that, they can shoot you down an email. So while he's doing that, I'll just say thank you guys so much for joining us. We're gonna do this every single month. I'm gonna bring on different people. We're gonna have these open forums. Next month we have one where we're gonna be talking about how to close online leads. So really excited about that. And we'll see you guys next month. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know, and we'll see you guys soon. You guys have a great day. Take care.